9 after 8 o'clock exactly. Good morning. Salaam alaikum. Welcome to the program. Lovely to have you with us on the show this morning. And as always, even if I don't say it on some mornings, you do know that you have to become a part of the conversation. Please do make your thoughts and your feelings known about everything we throw out on the show every day. So we do expect to hear from you today, inshallah. Professor Sipho Seepe, very good morning to you. You are a political analyst. You are regularly on our show here at Salam Media, and we absolutely love having you on the show and hearing your analyses on all of the different issues that we throw out. So, very good morning to you. Welcome. We are going to be talking about Dr. Mpho Phalatse and her next step going forward now that she's been ousted from the mayoral seat in the city of Johannesburg. But I'm wondering if you'd like to comment on the tweet that I shared a few minutes ago regarding the state of disaster.
Good morning, and Julie, and thanks for inviting me. And my initial response to the tweet is that it summarizes what the state of national disaster is likely to pan out like. We have been here before. We know that when we had the COVID-19, we had something similar called a state of national disaster. And what it meant is that we are going to suspend all the normal processes. And when you talk about normal processes, we're talking about processes that have to do with procurement. We're talking about the violation of people's rights. We also saw in the national state of disaster almost a justification of why we should also use brute force, and where you had the military deployed. One would probably understand that then we're dealing with a virus whose origin and how it's going to be solved was unclear. And what we did was simply to copy what other countries were doing. There was nothing innovative and original about what we did, except that we know that soon after that, we also saw the highest form of corruption taking place under the Ramaphosa administration. Now, with a self-created crisis in this country, now the president is now trying to say we should go that route. But one must also understand that it is also a reflection of a regime that they had reached an intellectual and political cul-de-sac. The President Ramaphosa was given the responsibility to deal with the energy crisis as far back as 2015. And he has made a number of promises. And yes, there was a reprieve or a moment when the load shedding was addressed. And that was between 2016 and 2017, and probably starting with 2015. But the load shedding came with him. And since then, he had made a number of promises. And he has since stopped making those promises. He has actually come to tell us that we should brace ourselves for the intermittent, permanent load shedding. The effects of it are known. The destruction of the economy, the loss of jobs by people. People talk about load shedding, job shedding, and water shedding. But we also know that it has also threatened job security. So yes, we are already in a state of disaster, but that may not require us to start now abandoning the normal processes of dealing with this. And we know what that look like. But it is simply an excuse. And as Ms. Pasha indicates, that we might end up with Ramaphosa's linked businesses or his friends making a meal out of this crisis. But what we should accept as a country is that we have no leader. He is the worst leader post 1994. We have a political crisis before us, even within the ANC. We have an economic crisis. We have a moral crisis, and the president is as a center of that moral crisis. Even as he talks about dealing with corruption, we also know that when it involves him, he's a man who can always rush to the judiciary, abuse the judiciary which for some reason appears to be willing to be abused and to protect the one man. So we are in a state where even the media itself, instead of pointing out this, they actually say, well, he is the better of the West, almost justifying the notion that Ramaphosa's reign must continue, even when it is very clear that he is failing in every which way. So Ms. Pasha's tweet is spot on, and we must be worried. But now that we know, it will be up to South Africans to say, are we going to be ready for this? And of course, there are people who see this as an opportunity to get rich, because once you suspend normal process of procurement, there'll be those who are going to benefit, but ultimately, the ordinary taxpayers are going to suffer.
I'm wondering if that's going to create a civil uprising. I mean, we've had enough, have we not? We've really come to the end of our tether. And this might just be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Would you agree? Or do you think that we're
Yeah,
so
I think
complacent, we're just going to
people.
carry on?
Well, if you look at the where we are as a people, almost day in day out there are protests, and in some instances you have 10 protests per day. All you that is required is one thing that will connect all these protests, and then we are going to have something akin to what we saw in Sri Lanka, where the people will take to the streets. Already, the EFF has called for Ramaphosa to resign, and to say if it does not resign, they promise to have a national shutdown. And I think when they call for that, they'll be building on the sense of alienation, the sense of anger that people are experiencing. You go to the townships of this country, they have become concentration camps of poverty, of unemployment, of criminality. And then you have a president who stands up there and repeats and tells people what everybody knows to be the case. The people of this country do not require the president to narrate what their challenges are. What they expect is a president who has been dying to be a president to come up with solutions. But this president is bankrupt at the level of ideas.
Do you think that planned march by the EFF and Ramaphosa's statements all over the media might be the tipping point for us here in the country? Because we
Well,
have reached, as I've said, we've reached the end of our tether.
we should actually worry about even the pronouncement of the state of disaster after the EFF had called for national shutdown. One hopes that it is not an excuse to use brute force and the military. The military is supposed to be there to protect the nation and its territorial integrity. This is why it's called the South African National Defense Force. It is not a force that must be used against the people, but we are now moving to a situation where that might actually be possible. And when that happens, then we should brace ourselves for more bloodshed. But what we should know is that those who make peaceful evolution impossible are planting the seed for violent revolutions. And let's hope we're not going to get there. Let's hope that some people who are sane will start looking at this proposed state of national disaster that is being proposed with careful eyes, given that we have been here before.
My final question on this matter, and then we'll move on to the Mpho Phalatse matter. Let's understand what the state of disaster is premised on. Why has it come about at this point in time? Is it because the president and government realizes that their hands are tied, that they've created so much of corruption and they've broken the system so badly that there's just no recourse? And maybe their thinking is that the state of disaster will give them the opportunity and the time to fix what's broken. Not that I believe that that would happen. If anything, they're going to break it even further. They're going to create more of a disaster than to protect the civilians and the country.
Well, my sense is actually correct. And it's very interesting that the notion of declaring a state of disaster national disaster comes after Ramaphosa said he has been consulting and after he had called for involvement of stakeholders. And we know that when you talk about the state of national disaster, you suspend the participation of all those people. And you make sure that you choose methods that we have not agreed to. So this is a justification, but it also shows that you have a party and a president who have reached a cul-de-sac. They do not know what to do. And the other thing is that they've also demonized people who were able to take us out of load shedding in the past. So effectively, when you have demonized people and you are desperate, you're not going to go back to those people. But what we know is that Ramaphosa is not the answer. He is actually a disaster himself. The only thing that he was able to solve in the last 5 years was a pothole that was even in a gravel road, which actually shows how desperate he is for attention. All the efforts in terms of investor conferences were simply smoke and mirrors. And no investments have actually come in this country that are meaningful, that have led to addressing the economic stagnation that we have experienced as a nation.
Okay, truly very gloomy. I know we've painted a very gloomy picture there, but that is the reality in South Africa. Lots to be worried about, lots to plan for going forward as ordinary citizens, because if the state of disaster is implemented, I can see us going through a very, very, very rocky patch ahead of us. We're going to take an ad break, and when we get back, we're going to be talking about Dr. Mpho Phalatse. Thank you indeed for your insights on the state of disaster going forward. Professor Sipho Seepe is our first guest for the morning. He is not going away. He'll be joining us right after the ad break, so please do stay with us.
This is Salam Media.
Ah, the kitchen, the heart of the home, where memories are made and celebrated. Our go-to place for those freshly stacked pancakes early in the morning or for that late-night snack munchies. We are in there together, cooking, eating and celebrating life together. Let's keep the kitchen a place that is shared by everyone, where we build stronger bonds and grow together. Sunfoil, now we cooking. Visit nowwecooking.co.za for recipes that everyone can help make.
Devastating floods in Pakistan have washed away villages, claimed the lives of more than 1,000 people, damaged nearly 1 million homes, and left over 33 million people in desperate need of help. As the catastrophe unfolds, Islamic Relief is on the ground, reaching people with life-saving aid. Our team are working tirelessly to deliver food and shelter. Your support is urgently needed now to help save more lives. Donate now to Islamic Relief.
There's no smell that takes me back to the comfort of my childhood than the smell of blackseed oil being applied by my nanny. Now I'm using Tib Blackseed in my own home to soothe sniffles and coughs, to help with digestion and immunity, and of course, as part of my beauty routine. After all these years, I've come to appreciate the wisdom in finding comfort and shifa in trusted treatments like Tib Blackseed. You can find Tib Blackseed at all leading pharmacies or find out more at blackseed.co.za.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Albeit Lodge, your true home away from home. Albeit is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists, with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities, conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities. Your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Albeit has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albeitlodge.co.za.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome back. It is exactly 8:23 a.m. We are talking with Professor Sipho Seepe. He is a political analyst. And we're now going to be focusing on Dr. Mpho Phalatse. She obviously was ousted from the mayoral seat here in Johannesburg. The woman survived 2 previous votes of no confidence, but the statement that I'm going to be sharing in a minute or two, and will ask Professor Sipho Seepe to respond to, just indicates what a tough cookie she actually is. She's truly confident, and I admire the confidence. Phalatse has announced, and this comes just a few days after being ousted as Johannesburg's mayor, and she had a media briefing at the Hector Peterson Memorial in Soweto yesterday. She said that the DA needs a dynamic leader who is familiar with the concept of servant leadership. She says she's going to be taking on John Steenhuisen at the official opposition party's federal congress in April. Quite a confident young lady, is she not? And she also talks about the concept of servant leadership. What exactly is she referring to there? And what do you make of this announcement, Professor?
Well, first of all, she is a professional and she's also a politician. And in deep down in all politicians is an element and a strong bout of ambition. And she may have made the determination that the image of the DA is an image that suggests that a different person is required to address that. She also talked about a grouping within the DA that seems to hold what you call strings, that where some people are simply users to being puppets. But the issue that she also tried to put across in some of the interviews is that she has been approached. But those of us who have been watching the DA would say we have seen this also before. We've seen the DA trying to parachute promising young Black people into positions of prominence, mainly to address the sense that people have that when you think about the DA, you think about the white party. And there have been those who have been saying you need to have what appears to be a credible Black voice. But she also talks about taking on somebody like John Steenhuisen. And whether one likes him or not, he is no
Very dynamic.
easy person to dispose. He is robust, and he has enjoyed a lot of support within the DA. And the last person who tried to contest got almost no vote. He got almost all the votes. So one must also understand that the group in the constituency that support the DA, especially financially, it is not the constituency that Mpho Phalatse comes from. So she must be able to measure that against the reality that the DA has actually failed to change. And also some of the pronouncements that have been made by people like Helen Zille around issues of colonialism are issues that have rubbed the constituency that Mpho Phalatse wants also to represent. So until you deal with those issues, and until you deal with the fact that many of the benefactors of the DA are largely white, and the DA has always made sure that it secures that white base, and then tries, once it has secured that base, it can then try to invite a few Black people. So I don't see chances of winning to be very strong. But even if you're to succeed, nothing guarantees that what happened to Patricia de Lille will not happen to her. What happened to Lindiwe Masibuko will not happen to her. What happened to Maimane will not happen to her. What happened to Mampela Rampela, it will not happen to her. But what we've seen is that an independent black thinker in the DA is easily shown the door. Musimamane, when he was ousted, he was beginning to talk about the language that talks about the redress. He was talking about the state of a nation, about what it means to be black and what it means to be black in terms of opportunities, and talking about that as we speak, the black opportunities for black people are still dire as compared to those of white people. He was beginning to talk the language of people like Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma when they talk about the state of the nation in this country as reflected by conditions of privilege and the conditions of disadvantage. And then he was pushed out. That all he had to do was to simply represent the liberal ideas without historicizing what happened in this country and why black people still find themselves in conditions of squalor, why they still find themselves concentrated in small patches of land in the country of their birth. And once you begin to speak that language, then you are showing the marching, you are showing the door. And I think these are the things that you must convince even those that want to support it, that how are you going to break against this wall that has been created, this wall of the no-go areas.
I'm wondering if people like Mpho Phalatse shouldn't be teaming up with Muzi Maimane, Lindiwe Mazibuko. She seems to have faded from the picture completely, but she was a very, very dynamic young lady. And then Mampela as well. I had high hopes for all three of these people. And I'm wondering if they shouldn't be joining forces together with Mpho Phalatse and start thinking about maybe formulating a new party. We've heard about, and I know I'm digressing here, but we're still on the topic of politics. We've heard about Muzi Maimane starting a new movement, but you haven't seen him much in the spotlight at all. And I do believe that he has a lot of charisma, and if teamed up with the right people, he can become quite a force to be contended with Mazibuko, with Mampela, with Mpho. These are the people that should be joining forces and creating their own party. I do know the danger there is would be that everyone's going to be jockeying for power because they're all such strong personalities and they all would want to be in the leadership position. But imagine all these minds together forming a party and taking South Africa forward. Or am I being very idealistic here when I make that suggestion?
Well, I don't think there's something wrong with that suggestion. I mean, we are in a state of disaster at the moment. And when people are in a disaster, they have to look at all possible opportunities. The challenge that they are going to face is that having been in bed with the DA, the question is that to what extent has this led to them, their credibility being questionable, especially to a bigger constituency. But I do think that we must get to a stage where our politics go beyond the traditional parties like the DA, like the ANC. The ANC has failed. I mean, it has been in power for so long, and the DA has not been able to penetrate sufficiently into the black community. But maybe what we need is a new thinking. We need to start reimagining a different South Africa. And maybe if there could be a discussion amongst similar minds. And one must also bring in somebody like Herman Mashaba, who also walked away proudly with his head high when he made the statement that should Helen Zille be elected into an influential position in the DA, he's going to walk away. And he did walk away. He didn't wait to be pushed out. Whereas the others were also were embarrassed. Effectively, their ambition was cut short. So they didn't leave the DA because it was out of their own volition. They were actually forced out. But having said that, we must not dismiss ideas that other people put on the table. And in the same way that Herman Mashaba was able to get a sizable number of people who are saying, we can work with you, we agree with the notion of a government that works. And one must also remember that when he was a mayor, he had a lot of support in terms of some of the programs that he was ushering. He was able to also work with the ANC, he was able to work with the EFF, simply because he was more pragmatic in the solution that he provided, to an extent that it was difficult for what you may call opposition parties to start trying to bring him down. Instead, he was able to forge possibilities. So I do think that what we need in this country is the creation of possibilities. But the more of the same will not work. It has not worked in the past.
We let's go back to Mpho Phalatse, and then I want to talk about politics rather broadly. There's something else I need to have you analyze for us this morning. Even though we have agreed by way of this conversation that we don't think that Mpho Phalatse stands a chance as far as the DA is concerned, given the background you sketched of what their constituency and their backing looks like. She goes on to say that she's the only candidate for this position. She's had a very rewarding experience, and she goes on to say, and I quote, "I also believe that my many years of experience as a technocrat in government and as a politician have sufficiently prepared me for the position of DA federal leader. Leading a huge multi-party coalition government in the city of Johannesburg, which is the economic hub of the country and continent, is not something to be taken lightly." Your thoughts?
Well, I can assure you that nothing teaches like being in government.
Absolutely.
And one must not try to underplay the level of experience that she has gathered, the understanding of the complexity of government. So to that extent, she can put that as within the DA, no one except Helen Zille has actually run such complex operations. So that is actually positive. And the fact that she had been ousted had less to do with how effective she was. It had to do with the political posturing that you find among parties. What one would have wanted is for those who are opposed to her and those who have actually removed her, to say these are the areas of failure. But what you found is that there's been more talk about pushing the DA because of its arrogance. But whether the alternative and what is being presented is better is anybody's guess. But what one should not undermine is the manner in which she's positioning herself, to say, I'm a feisty woman, and when I was removed, I was able to go to court and I won. And two, I have been able to run a tight ship. Whether it has been to address the people's concern is something else. But being exposed to that position provides somebody with an exponential growth in terms of experience in dealing with complexity. So she can present that to the DA. But the other issue is whether the DA itself is ready to be led by a strong black woman, and whether they are willing to be led by somebody who says, I also have a brain and that I can bring to the table. I mean, she's an accomplished professional, somebody with a degree in medicine. So it's not somebody you can just simply try to undermine and to dismiss. And I think we should not do that. What you may also need to do beyond the DA is to simply say, these are the pragmatic solutions that I was able to do to provide. And these are how I have succeeded. And also to point out that my removal had more to do with simply political contestation and less to do
Absolutely.
with my capability and my delivery track record.
Watch the space. I think she's going to form her own political party or team up with the guys, the names that I've just mentioned early on. So good luck to her. My final question then to you would be, what are your thoughts on the current mayor, Tapelo Ahmad? Your thoughts on him as a candidate for mayor of Johannesburg? Well, I mean, he's already been sworn in. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think nobody takes him seriously. He's simply a placeholder until one of the parties starts putting in their own. And I think the EFF might as well put a candidate there. I don't think he has any other illusion that he can stay that long. And besides, he comes from a very a party with a small support. So it is simply a placeholder while the big parties are still trying to find an accommodation of each other, and there'll be a lot of what you call engagement behind the scenes. But he's simply a person who's put there until decisions have been taken elsewhere.
The night watchman, as it were. We do wish him luck in the short stint that he's going to be serving, but undoubtedly he will gain lots of experience. Thank you indeed. I'm just wondering, and I know I'm pressed for time. I think I should leave this for another interview. There's talk on the ground that there's a possibility that the ANC is going to find some excuse or the other to delay the elections next year. But I know it's going to be a very lengthy answer. Let's leave it for another interview. As always, wonderful talking with you, Professor Sipho Seepe, and I look forward to future chats with you. God bless. Stay safe.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
The time is exactly 8:41 a.m. Standing by to talk with us is Dost Mohammed Baresh, lecturer in the International Relations IR Department at the University of Baluchistan in Quetta, Pakistan. We're going to be talking about the killings in a mosque in Peshawar, Pakistan. So please stay with us.